The reality is that any cancer journey brings many kinds of loss, even if one becomes a cancer survivor. And it is our preparation for and our response to those losses that makes the difference. Welcome to the Q4 Impact Podcast, where through scripture, story, and conversation, we inspire you to make an impact all the way through the fourth quarter of your life. Welcome back to today's podcast, where we are joined by a very special guest by the name of Mike Landig. When I announced today's episode last week, we heard that we're going to be tackling a very tender topic, and that is the topic of cancer and the many losses that come along with such a diagnosis. Mike Landig is one who has walked through cancer intimately with his wife. And so let me introduce him a little bit more before we dive into this episode. So Mike has been the CEO of Sunset Lighting for over 30 years. Sunset Lighting is in Southern California, and they're a successful facility service company. And in other hats that he's also been a as a pastor, as an associate pastor, and also held various roles in Christian education. Mike met his wife, Janie, in 1983, and they fell madly in love and were married just 10 months later. Together, they have 3 children. Yet, in only the 18th year of their marriage, they received a cancer diagnosis. And anyone who has ever been in that position knows that that very word can just strike fear and many emotions in the pit of your stomach. That is when their life changed forever. So, Mike, we are thankful that you have chosen to be with us today and are willing to share some of your and Janie's story as we dive into those losses that come with cancer, but also who is always with us in the midst of cancer. So welcome.
It's most excellent to be here, and I love your ministry. I love you guys, Ron, for almost 40 years. And this is a blessing upon blessing to be with you guys. So thank you very much.
Good, Mike. So cancer wasn't a part of your life or on your radar. Describe for us like your life when you first received the cancer diagnosis. Where were you at? What was the setting?
Well, I was 52 and my bride, Janie, was 48. And we had a very full life. We had 3 kids. 2 were in club soccer. I'd say, Janie, it's Friday night. I'll see you on Sunday night because we're going to Dallas to play soccer and you're going to San Diego, and would rejoin again. And that took a lot of time. And then my oldest child loved dance. And she's gone as far as to study flamenco in Madrid. So she's quite accomplished. And it's just a blessing to watch her dance. The ministry that Janie had, she fell absolutely in love with a program that used to be called, I don't even know if it's around anymore, Evangelism Explosion. And she's taught how to share Christ. And God shaped her as an evangelist, among other gifts. And she'd be here baking cookies and then have a rendezvous point with a partner. And they would go door to door with leads or people who left something at church, a questionnaire or something, and they'd knock on the door and offer them warm chocolate chip cookies. And how could anybody say no to that, right? And oh my gosh, she got very competent and had a lot of wonderful moments doing that. She loved women's ministry and such a tender heart for other women. Her last birthday, she got 85 birthday cards. Can you imagine? All from women. And not counting the kids or myself. And my ministry was pretty exciting. I was on the men's leadership board, and for all the men in the church, myself and a very good brother who lived right across the street from me, we got together and wrote questions on whatever book of the Bible pastorate said what we're going to teach on. So I was a question writer. And I was also on the missions team. And I love that ministry. I got to take 45 adults down below Ensenada. And the longer you went on that dirt road, it was ancient history. That kind of environment. You go, oh my gosh, look how these people live. I didn't know people lived like this, in North America or that far north and South America. But did that a couple of times. The second time, I took two of my electricians, and we to the same orphanage. I didn't say that, but it was the same orphanage, the Door of Faith. But we rewired the entire facility because it was old cloth-lined wire, and all the cloth was falling off, and a tall orphan could reach up and touch it. So they erected the poles we needed, but we ran wire and panels to every room, put lights in long walkways so it was always dark. And that was so meaningful, that trip. And I was also on a 501(c) where we were qualified people who wanted to go into missionary work and help them understand their core values and missions and the purpose, and get them to really be able to enunciate all those things, and then help them raise support, and then be the accountancy arm for them. So that was very, very, those things were very time consuming, and I passionately in love with them. I started a men's group 15 years before this, and it's still going today. It's approaching 35 years. And it's the names and faces change, and many are still there, but that was a very big blessing. And Janie and I were passionate about couples ministry, and this house that God blessed me with had as many as 27 in one group, which is not a small group anymore, but many, many small groups throughout these years. And she was a biology teacher at junior high, then high school, and then a lecturer at the local university. And she managed student teachers by traveling around to schools and looking at their lessons plans and that caper. She was also on the school board of a Christian school. So busy, 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 right? So that was our history at the moment all this began.
So it sounds to me, I would summarize what you just shared. It seemed like you were thriving, and family, the kids are young, there's busy activity, ministry, a very full life. And then all of a sudden one day, bam, this cancer diagnosis gets dropped on you. What was your first reaction? Tell us about that.
Well, the first thing that happened, and you understand, we were so naive, had no idea what cancer was. It wasn't in, like you said, Ron, earlier, it just wasn't in any of our dreams and plans and thinking. We never thought about it. And she said to me one morning, Mike, I feel like I got a lump in my breast. I go, a lump? She goes, yeah. And she goes, it was high in the breast, and said, can you feel it? And I said, I don't feel anything. So there was a dialogue about that, not sure what she meant. And then she goes, I think it's getting bigger a week or two later. And so we got an appointment. And I went to the first appointment to meet people. And then there was going to be some scans and things like that, which she said, you got work to do, don't come. And not knowing the results of the scans, I went to a industry show and training, and dinner. And before dinner, my phone rings, and I flipped it open, and it's the new oncologist I barely met. I go, what the heck is this? So I stepped out of the room, and he goes, Mike, are you home? I go, no, I'm not home. He goes, get home right now. Your wife needs you. And I went, that was so frightening and shocking and confusing. So I raced home, and she wasn't sure really what was going on either. But she said, we have an appointment tomorrow morning. That's a little bit of a foreboding thought, but it wasn't like we had this experience. So we were thinking, could it be something else? So we went there, and we checked into the sanitized vinyl-lined windows that, you pull the string and it moves, and it's linoleum floors. But then a nurse escorts us to this room when you go in, and it's carpeted, drapery on the windows, table lamps all dimmed, and you go in and sit down, and you were there alone. Remember, we sat in the middle of the table, and then a procession of people in oncology came in. And now you're starting to think, what is this? And then they said, well, you have breast cancer. And we cried our eyes out. We didn't want to believe it. And, I still get choked up at that moment. So then there's all these processes you go through. And sure enough, we were going to begin the battle of our lives. So during that time, chemo was much more violent to the body than it is today. And I would go with her, and we'd sit in the chemo room, and it'd be a bunch of other ladies in the room. And I would then drive her home, and she'd cook dinner, would have dinner. But the next day, it would crush you. And she goes, and when it was the springtime or early summer, she goes, set up the lawn chairs out back under that tree, fill up the ice chest with treats for the day, a pillow and a blanket. And all she wanted to do was lay down and sleep all day outside. And I just never forgot leaving her and then coming home after work and seeing her still there. And then later in the evening, her strength would start returning. And so you realize that this is a big deal.
So, Mike, thank you for just being willing to be vulnerable and transparent with us. When I said in the introduction that it's life-changing, those words hardly even capture all the feelings and emotions that this was just 18 years after you were married. So we're going 2002. It's still as fresh and as raw because it is so impacting. So the title of this podcast today is navigating the losses associated with cancer, and what you just described is already painting a picture of some of those losses. And the reality is that any cancer journey brings many kinds of loss, even if one becomes a cancer survivor. And it is our preparation for and our response to those losses that makes the difference. So I would like to start by asking, can you share with us just more of the losses that you and Janie experienced as a result of your cancer journey through those years?
Yes, I can. And, in the beginning of it is, wait a minute, we had planned a vacation. The blood draws, the CT scans, the oncology reviews. Oh my gosh, all that's got to be changed. And when you get the diagnosis of cancer, it's not like, well, your leg's broken, here's the cast, come back in 12 weeks, we'll take it off. We know that there's no cure for cancer. And we would constantly be alerted to, I can't go to that meeting because I've got a scan that day, or I'm going to go talk to the doctor about some other treatments. You just realize your planning, your time is no longer yours. You lose that freedom. And the other thing is, there's a traumatic shock that penetrates you, that this is now our life together, and you struggle for peace, and you struggle for thanksgiving. You struggle for all the things that Jesus pointed to and all the things you can't understand in life. He gave you what you need to understand. You don't need to understand the whole universe, but what you need to live a godly life in Christ is all there in His Word. And we just leaned into that and struggled to get it. But then when you wake up in the morning, there's this bald lady sleeping with you She has no eyelashes. Her skin isn't the vibrant red it was. That's a shock. And we completed 8 of 10 cycles, but her body could take no more. So he says, we're going to stop. It looks good. And we were very relieved. And he said, what we do now is take tamoxifen, which is a thing that continues in your bloodstream, dealing with the cancer and many of the things that it's associated with. And we'll continue to come every 30 days for the first 90 days. Then we'll go every 45 and every 60. So they say the results look great, but you can't forget about it. You're constantly reminded monthly that you are not in remission, but everything looks good. So the last word he says to you is you have to be cancer-free for 5 years. And then we will declare you in remission. So Janie and I, you get an idea how busy we were. At the end of the school year, 4 years and 9 months after the beginning of the 5-year period, she calls me. I hear she's out at the field with some student teachers, and she goes, "Hey, what was the result of that last scan?" I go, "What? The last scan?" And I go, "Jenny, they will only tell you. You know that." She goes, "Okay, I'll call them right away." So then she called me back about an hour later and said, "We have an appointment at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning at the hospital." I go, "We do? Did you get the results?" "No." Okay, so we drove there and we checked in. Instead of going to an exam room, we were led to the oncologist room. And we walked in. I sat by the door. She sat facing the oncologist. And the oncologist said, "I have made a tragic and terrible mistake." And she burst into tears. Shock. What? Are the oncologists crying? We cry. They encourage. She goes, I misfiled your scan results. And so you never got a call. And so she goes, you've had your cancer changed to the most aggressive cancer we know for breast, called triple negative. Simple fact of it. And it's been almost 6 months that it's changed. She just cried and cried. Well, what did we do? We cried and cried. And when we regained it, we are godly people. She made a mistake, right? She's a professional. It's the practice of medicine, right? They're practicing. So we just said, she goes, what do you want to do? I said, Janie, I think we need to go someplace else. And she goes, I thought that would be your answer. So we waited while they packed up all the files and everything, brought them out in a filing box, and we said goodbye. And then later we called back to ask her a question. She had left the practice. I don't know if it was related to that tragic mistake, but the cancer had exploded. That was crushing, but we got into new treatment, and this was at a very big cancer institution, and we'd had a scan that day, and we were driving home. This was years later, and our oncologist at that point was an amazingly austere, speechless character. He didn't talk. He was, it was tough to get conversation with him. So we're driving back from that institution in LA County, going to Orange County, and the phone rings, and it goes to the speakers in the car, and he announces himself, and he sounds like a little boy on Christmas morning. And we go, Doctor, what's going on? He goes, you're cancer-free. you don't always know what the inner parts of your heart are, the deepest realm of them. We search God, and God reveals, know my ways, Lord. Anything that's transgressing against you, reveal to me that I may repent. We exploded. I said, stop talking. I can't drive. Janie erupted in joyous praise. It was like, oh my God. We got off fortunately, there was a freeway exit right there. We pulled into a restaurant parking lot, which was only night only. It was empty. Tell us the story. And he just went on and on and on. There was an eruption of joy I don't think I've ever seen before. You are cancer-free. So we went through 3 weeks of celebration, telling the world. And then I was sitting at my office thinking life was back to normal, and he calls me. And I go, hey, doctor, I'm surprised to hear from you. And he goes, Mike, I made a big mistake. I said, what? What do you mean you made a big mistake? You saw a scan. With this treatment, we're pretty certain it's coming back. Oh my God. You talk about loss at that moment. So I left and had to go home and tell Janie what he just said. And it did come back. And the battle kept going. So those are some of the losses. Crushing. But, I just want to say this at this moment. Psalm 130 talks about, it starts with, oh my God, Lord, it's like my world is ending. The bottom is falling out. And that's what it was like. But you know what? As far as I have fallen, I always found Jesus there. Where can I go from your spirit? Right? That's that verse in the Bible. And so those were just part and parcel of daily living. Janie was a firecracker. She has run 12 marathons. When I was courting her, she made me come to her advanced aerobics class. 90 minutes of aerobics. I didn't know what aerobic meant at that time. And after that was going, woo, because it involved pull-ups, chin-ups, and then, this dancing, which I'm quite the dancer, actually. I'll remain humble. But when the 90 minutes was over, she goes, now we're going to go run 5 miles. I'm like, 5 miles? Now, at that time, I was 5 days a week surfing and playing tennis, and I was in good shape. And and it was the first half of it was all uphill. In fact, it felt like it was uphill the whole way. But when we got to the end, she goes, wow, you didn't break stride once. So I was now in the approval category as a boyfriend. That's who she was. And she's ridden a bike with me all over Tuscany. We did 300 miles and 13,000 feet of climbing because Tuscany is up and down. So she's a tough cookie. And we try to remain active between treatments. Over the 18 years, we had 8 different sessions of intense chemo or clinical trial. And when one failed, we had to go to the next one. So the beauty of encouragement in a marriage that's found in Christ, during those hard times, it wasn't just, Lord, I'm getting out of bed. May my feet walk in righteousness. May I walk with humility, sharing you with love everywhere I go. Off I go to work, or, 12 minutes in the Bible, and, but we are at the point now where I remember we were in Colossians and we were in the 3rd chapter, 2nd and 3rd chapter. We were reading it out loud. And then we were praying. And these weren't these morning bullet prayers when you're racing to get an appointment or you have something you have to do. And then it was not just bullet prayers. They were meant to be very long prayers of discussion in front of each other with the Lord, what was going on in our hearts. And she began in our first session. And she started praying. They were the most tender words I've ever heard in my life. There were so many people that she mentioned, because this is, you pray until you've emptied yourself of agreement. And the love that was expressed, the kindness. And I just stopped listening. I had to watch her. And then she prayed for me. Lord, I'm suffering, but I'm not suffering half as bad as my caregiver. I know that's true. And she just began to give thanksgiving for me. And then she prayed for the children, my children. And, they suffer with you. Their essays are always on my mom, the greatest hero I know.
So, Mike, you did such a great job in describing this life that you had with your family and with Janie. And here you come across this incredibly difficult period and get this devastating news. Did that affect your theology as it pertained to suffering and adversity?
It was a major impact. But I had an abusive childhood. My father was just a cruel man. And after I became a Christian, I had to learn to forgive and love him. And then I became a principal of a Christian school that was going bankrupt. And through God's grace, we saved it, we renovated it. And I learned very difficult that my pastor had given my job away. And I didn't expect that to happen. And the grounds for it were not righteous. And that made me, those two experiences and reconciling how God was working in my life was difficult. But it toughened me. So when Janie and my life, the bottom fell out, I had some very hard experiences that helped me through it.
And so I'm hearing you say, Mike, that your theology of God by that stage of your life didn't really change because you had already this is not a glass half empty kind of perspective, but you'd already learned that tragedy is a part of life. And that being said, you still knew who your God was, the true God that you knew from the Bible and experientially. Is there anything you want to add to that?
And all the learning, I stopped asking why me. And I started saying, why not? In the world, you will have tribulation where you're promised. And in the great sorrow, he always met me and I found joy.
What a testimony you have, because that is powerful right there. I think if it's the very end of our podcast, that piece is what I want people to really hold on to, because whether it is cancer that rocks their world, whether personally or within a family member or a friend or another form of tragedy, you're absolutely right. We are not promised that perfect life, but we are promised God's presence with us through every trial, through every suffering, every adversity. And that's what I hear that you and Janie clung to year after devastation, after disappointment, after false hope. You clung to who he is. So we're going to wrap up today's, because we're not done. And we're going to have Mike back with us next week. And for those of you old enough to remember this, as Paul Harvey used to say, we will have the rest of the story. And it is a good story. It may be unexpected, but it is worth tuning in because Mike has something that is a treasure to listen to. So thanks for listening today, and look forward to having you next week. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Q4 Impact Podcast. To continue receiving encouragement and practical tips on how to live with purpose and meaning through the many changes and challenges of life, please be sure to subscribe. And please share it with others you think may also benefit.